All right, so it's already recording, but we can just share the portion we decide to.
Pretty sure I can lop it off. In
Okay,
fact,
perfect.
I can pause.
A few weeks. Link Technologies is going to celebrate 25 years of business Friday at 3 o'clock this Friday with a ribbon cutting at their offices. Weiler Law Group will cut a ribbon on June 15th to celebrate at 4 o'clock to celebrate the opening of their business. And then upcoming, I think this will be really interesting for our members. On June 21st, we are offering an introduction to EOS from 7:30 till 9 o'clock at the H Hotel. Our MyPro series of events continues with young professionals. We're going to have 2 social events planned yet this year. So all these details can be found on our website, mbami.org. And of course, as we get into the summer, the Midland Farmers Market is open every Wednesday and Saturday from 7 a.m. till 1 p.m. In the outfield parking lot of Dow Diamond. So please join us over there at the Farmers Market. With that, I'm going to take a few minutes and we're going to turn it over to today's sponsor program, Warner Norcross and Judd. So I'm going to turn it over to our friend, John Lauterbach. John.
Thank you, Tony. Good morning, everyone. On behalf of Warner Norcross and Judd, I want to welcome you to today's program. Warner is a law firm that primarily serves the needs of the business community in the region. And so we've partnered with the MBA to sponsor the Issues and Answers series. And we really appreciate Tony and Diane and the efforts of everybody at MBA to deliver timely, relevant programming that's of interest to business owners and decision makers in our community. Really looking forward to today's program and this distinguished panel. And Tony, thanks again. Looking forward to a great program.
Thank you, Don. Again, thanks so much for sponsoring. So I'm going to turn it over to our great Vice President of Advocacy, Diane Middleton, and she's going to introduce our distinguished panel.
Hey, thank you, Tony, and thank you, everyone, for joining us this morning. This should be a great program, and we're excited that you're here. We do have 3 great speakers with us this morning. I have the honor of introducing them, and then they'll get rolling on their presentations. So Eric Lufer is the president of Citizens Research Council. He's been in that role since 2014, but he's actually been with Citizens Research Council since 1987. Now, he's been able to research such issues as state taxes, state revenue sharing, highway funding, unemployment insurance, economic development incentives. His recent work focused on local government matters. He is past president of the Governmental Research Association and has also served as vice chairman of the Governmental Accounting Standards Advisory Council, an advisory body for the Governmental Accounting Standards Board. And if you're in the accounting field, you're very familiar with them and all of the standards that they issue. Eric is a graduate of both James Madison College and Michigan State University and earned a master's in public administration from Wayne State University. We also have John Kozinski joining us this morning. He is the Director of Governmental Affairs at Saginaw Valley State University. It's a great day to be a Cardinal, where his job entails interfacing with government and essentially lobbying on behalf of SVSU in Washington, D.C., Lansing, and throughout the Great Lakes Bay region. Prior to this role, John served as an assistant professor of political science and as director of the Center for Public Policy and Service at SVSU. Now, over his career, he has completed many projects that required public policy engagement throughout the state of Michigan. And John's work has brought positive results for Cadillac, Grand Haven, Saginaw, Bay City, Midland, and Frankenmuth, as well as for MSU, the Michigan Department of Military and Veterans Affairs, and for the Office of the Governor of Michigan. John has volunteered as talent with the Great Lakes Bay Regional Workforce and Talent Development Board, the City of Frankenmuth Planning Commission, Kochville Township DDA, Saginaw County Chamber of Commerce, Great Lakes Bay Economics Club, Great Lakes Bay Infuse, and Youth Solutions Incorporated. John earned his bachelor's and master's of public administration from CMU Fire Up Chips He and his wife, Martha, reside in Frankenmuth with their adorable son, George. And then finally, we have Jeff Stoutenberg. Jeff is the Director of State Government Affairs with Dow. Jeff began his career in the Michigan House of Representatives as a legislative aide to a state representative. He moved on to the state's House Fiscal Agency as a legislative analyst. In that role, he was responsible for providing policy expertise to legislators and staff, and he served as the agency's lead analyst on natural resources, regulatory reform, and environmental issues. He joined Dow in 2014 and now leads Dow's political, public policy, and advocacy activities in the entire Midwest and Northeast states. Jeff earned his bachelor's and master's degrees from CMU, again, fire up chips, and since graduation has held many volunteer leadership positions with CMU as well. Jeff and his wife live in Midland, and they also have an adorable son named Max. So with all of that, speakers, thank you so much for being with us this morning, and I will turn it over to Eric.
Thank you, Diane. So I'm going to lay some groundwork on the whole census process and redistricting, a little bit of evaluation of the recent process we've gone through as a state, new process for us, and provide a little bit of context of what that looks like compared to a number of other states. So we start off with the whole idea of redistricting, which is kind of the bedrock principle of representative democracy, that we're going to choose people to help make policy for us. And in order to do that, we want to have rough representation of the state in this case. And to do that, the US law lays out that we're going to have a census once every 10 years. And the results of that are used to draw the lines for congressional districts, most important for US purposes. But because we've done that, we also use that to draw state boundaries for the state house and Senate, county lines in the case of Midland, city wards. So it extends far down into that. It was not long into the process in US history where elected officials decided, you know what, we can really use this to our advantage. And so the whole concept of gerrymandering, as we call it, was created. And the idea is that you can either spread voters over a number of districts to dilute their voting strength, or pack them into a single district. So you sort of concede one district to the minority party and then strengthen all the rest of the districts for the majority party. So we've seen this going on for a long time. As my slide says, you know, there's some downsides to it. If you're the party in charge, you love it. But what we see is that it distorts electoral outcomes, weakens representation, benefits incumbents in an artificial way. I think above all else, it weakens trust in government. Feel like your vote doesn't matter, so why bother? And they're not really trying to represent me. So Michigan has kind of a sordid history on redistricting. Prior to the 1963 Constitution, it was the responsibility of the legislature. The CON at that time recognized the problems with that, and their solution they came up with was to create an independent commission. Sounds familiar. We just did this a few years ago. Their iteration of it would have 4 representatives, 2 from each major party. And as John and Jeff can tell you, there's no such thing as consensus building by creating even sides and hoping they come to a compromise. That just doesn't happen in politics. It didn't happen in the 60s, 70s, 80s. It doesn't happen today. So the process deadlocked, surprise, surprise, 3 times in the 60s, the 70s, 1981. Following the 81 deadlock, the was challenged. It was challenged because the provisions in the Constitution said that we as a state should use more than population for accounting for redistricting. The Senate districts were supposed to count for land area. So they wanted to provide for large expanses up north where there was less population, but more land area. The representative districts were supposed to adhere to county lines as much as possible. At the time they were drawing the 1963 Constitution, we didn't have the one man, one vote standard that we do today. In fact, that was being litigated in the US Supreme Court at the time. And it wasn't clear which way it was going to come down. So there was a little bit of guessing. They guessed wrong and provided for these other measures to be used. And so we had a commission system that wasn't working. We had provisions in the for drawing the lines that were unconstitutional, and they blew the system up. They said none of that's going to happen. We're going to ignore the state constitution, and they handed responsibility over to the Michigan legislature. The only criteria that the Michigan legislature had to adhere to was the idea of equal population and adhering to the Voting Rights Act to make minority majority districts where appropriate. And what we've seen for the last several redistricting, we had unitary control of government between the executive branch and the legislative branch, and the party used that to their advantage each time, redistricting in a way that really created safe districts, really drew it to the favor of the Republican Party. And we were able to do studies and identified that Michigan had a gerrymandering problem much stronger than almost any other state in the nation. And to do that, I'll show you a few measures. This first few are sort of, it didn't pass the eye test. So you see on the left, the House District 76, this is metropolitan Grand Rapids, how they drew a district, sort of a question mark shape, how those people are related to each other spread over such a wide geographic area. There might be a good purpose for it. We see in other places strange looking districts that are justified, less so with this one. To the right, Senate District 8 down in Macomb County, all in the same county, but really spread out throughout the whole county to try to choose the voters rather than the voters choosing the candidates. The districts also failed the eye test when you look at proportionality. What we had in 2018, roughly even votes between Republicans and Democrats. What we see for the congressional district, the lines were drawn in such a way that it gave a 9-5 majority in 2018 to the Republican Party. That evened out in 2020. Well, we saw over a number of years how that played out. The House representation followed the same pattern. The Senate, even more so, geared towards the Republican Party. We, using a number of measures that others created, these were not of our own creation, were able to then look statistically at a number of different measures. I'm not going to go through those, but suffice it to say, Michigan failed on all of these. It showed there were significant amounts of gerrymandering. You can account for some of that with geographic shape of our state, having the 2 peninsulas and whatnot, but nonetheless, we failed as a state. having representative democracy was important. So that brings us to the present day. And what I'll show you over the next couple of slides is that the 50 states are heading in different directions this cycle. Why is that? So Michigan, like several other states, recreated our independent commission, this time called the Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission. And it wrested control of the process from the legislature, gave it to the people, and created a new set of criteria for redistricting and significantly prioritized those. So they weren't just thrown in a basket and the commission can choose which ones they thought were important. The Constitution now tells those involved in redistricting which are the most significant, second most, third most, and so on. At the same time, the United States Supreme Court was wrestling with this idea of gerrymandering and if there's anything that can be done to weigh in on it. And what we found and what the US Supreme Court decided was that the states had so many things going on. This was not all about the politics of the different states, but when you look at Hawaii with the different islands, when you look at places out west with huge expanses of national parkland, just open expanses of land, it was really hard to come up with any single measure that would say, this is gerrymandering, this is wrong, this is what we're going to do about it. And they came down and said that the claims of excessive partisanship are beyond the capacity of the federal courts to resolve. If the people think it's important, they have to go to the state courts, state legislatures to regulate it. And Congress could play a role, but nobody is hopeful that that's going to happen anytime soon. So let me break these things down a little bit. We created with the Voters Not Politicians measure, created this new commission. Instead of having those equal representation, now we have 4 Republicans, 4 Democrats, and importantly, 5 independents. So we have, and it's structured in a way that you have to get votes from each of those groups. So we cannot end up in a tie anymore. And I won't go through the details, but it created a voting system really meant to push the groups to consensus, push them to what's acceptable to everyone, instead of the parties staking out claims on the far right or the far left, what's best for their own party. The whole process, because of the pandemic, was kind of a mess. The census happened late, the results coming back to the states were late, messed up a whole timeline that was laid out, very thought out on how this commission should do its work. But nonetheless, it went through, did the best it could with the information and the time it had available to it, and it got the job done. And when you think back to what we as a state went through for 3 decades before this, where the legislature, a small group of legislators would go in a back room and meet with an expert and lay out their priorities and choose their voters, what areas they wanted. This time it was held in the public. There was hearings throughout the state. Maps were offered by a number of different people. They had a multitude of maps to choose from. They listened, what are the communities of interest? And it's up to the people to say what those communities of interest were. And they came out with some maps and mentioned the new criteria. Starting off, we had to have equal population and comply with the Voting Rights Act. That is in accordance with federal law, so there wasn't much we could do about that, but they embedded it into the state constitution. It's accepted that the districts must be contiguous. We prioritize that. This new measure, the state's communities of interest was new, not new nationally. Some other states have been using it, but new to Michigan. So there was a lot of process in deciding what that means, and for the commission, how to weigh one community of interest versus another. The Constitution stipulated that you could not provide a party with a disproportionate advantage. And a way, talked about some of those measures of statistics that I hit on briefly there. Cannot favor a candidate, so we might have some incumbents who say, I want to run again and I want to preserve my district. The commission was not to look at that in any way. Number 6 is important as I go forward. It's not to reflect county, city, or township boundary. They should reflect the boundaries. But here, it's prioritized, I said. So this is number 6 on the list. And the district should be reasonably compact. So briefly, I went to a website. There's a group out of Princeton University that is looking at the 50 states, how they're going through their processes and weighing the maps or grading the maps on how they've done in addressing gerrymandering. They use 3 measures looking at partisan fairness, competitiveness, and the geographic features. Michigan, as you can see, grades a B for its House districts. But why does it grade a B? It grades a B because of geographic features. But I just told you that keeping the counties together, keeping the cities or townships together was 6 on that list of 7. So our Constitution says don't prioritize this. The Princeton gerrymandering project gave us a notch down for that. I can live with that. According to them, it gives our House districts give a slight Democratic advantage. I'm hoping John and Jeff can talk about that. The Senate districts, again, a B. This is sort of middle of the road. They didn't give us an A on anything. They didn't mark us down as much for geographic features. Again, according to Princeton, slight Democratic advantage. The congressional districts, this time we graded better, get an A. According to Princeton, no party has a clear advantage with the districts that were created. And throughout those maps, we can pull them up later in discussion if you want. What really strikes me is that there are very few districts that are really safe, right? There's what we saw for the last couple processes. There was districts that were so safe that you got people from the far right or the far left that could get elected. And what happens when you have districts that are more balanced, more evenly distributed between the parties, it really is going to push candidates to the middle a little bit to appeal to voters from both sides, and being extreme is not going to be an advantage anymore. So what do we think of the process we've gone through? On paper, the positives on paper, these districts better reflect the political composition of the voters. Michigan really is a purple state, a mix of the red Republican and blue Democrat. And it has been that way for many years. We think there's going to be fewer wasted votes. So wasted votes, once you get to 50% plus 1 vote, you're winning, and anything beyond that is considered a wasted vote. So this idea of having extreme districts is pushed out. The fact that they're more balanced means fewer wasted votes. And therefore, we're going to have fewer legislators, we think, reflecting the political extremes, again, pushing those candidates to the middle. The concerns, the proposed maps have diluted the minority-majority district. Diane hit on this real quickly at the beginning, that there were lawsuits because there's fewer majority-minority districts, and therefore the ability of Black candidates or other people of color to get elected is going to be a concern. There's concerns that it combines or divides counties, and again, that was ranked low. It's a criticism, but in adopting our new constitutional amendment, they said that it should rank low. So there we go. And the whole idea of creating communities of interest and seeing what they are. The commission had a hard time prioritizing what community of interest is significant and which ones are not. Let me go through real quick in the time I have left to sort of put this into a national context. So when the Voters Not Politicians was created and they were trying to figure out what Michigan should look like, they looked at Arizona and California, who had done this before us. Both achieved results in 2021 similar to Michigan. Washington has a Citizens Commission. It has done a great job of achieving balance. There were 3 other states in 2018 that adopted redistricting reforms at the same time we did. Colorado has adopted fair balanced maps. Utah is a Republican state, will probably long be a Republican state, but we see in the maps there's some improvements, some greater balance to help the Democratic Party. In Missouri is just a mess. They have gotten bogged down in the legality of everything. So here again, looking at the Princeton project, you see Arizona's gotten a, we don't need to go through the geography of the state of Arizona, but it gives a Republican advantage, but they think it was done in a fair way, creating balance as much as possible. On the other hand, there's a number of states that have taken that ruling in Rucho versus Common Cause, the US Supreme Court case, and just run with it, right? So to remind you, that case said that there's no federal criteria for judging how much gerrymandering is too much. They said it's not judiciable at the federal level. It, in essence, gave the ruling party in the different states carte blanche, go do whatever you want. And what we're seeing is that legislators are using that ruling to say we can create political gerrymandering. And in some cases, they're using that to undo the Voting Rights Act and some other things, all in the name of political gerrymandering. And it's going on both sides, I point out. So New York, a historically Democratic state, gets an F from the Princeton gerrymandering project. It's giving a Democratic advantage. They've drawn it in such a way to really favor the Democrats. Maryland, another Democratic state, there's no red on the map. They have done everything to advantage the Democratic Party. On the other side of the ledger, we see that Alabama, a Republican state, has used this to their advantage. There's no grades yet. When they do put them up, it's going to be an F. Ohio, just to our south, used to be a purple state like Michigan, clearly has moved to the right, favoring the Republican Party, but the party in charge, the Republican Party, has just run wild with this idea that they don't have to account for the different parties. Texas has done the same thing, getting an F. So I know John's going to hit on this. Let me just quickly talk about the Midland districts. You see on the right side, the 2011 districts, on the left side, the new districts. You can see that in 2011, sort of split up Bay City and Midland, and what we see in 2021, the whole Midland, Bay City, Saginaw area is put together. It extends far south and to pick up Flint. So sort of change the geography of the district for the congressional 8th district. For the Senate, we saw that the 36 stretched way far to the north, the 31st district stretched far to the south. Now in 2021, you have a more compact district, again, picking up Midland, Bay City, and Saginaw, much more compact. And then the House district, 2011, sort of stretched in several several districts or directions, I mean to say here. In 2021, still have a number of districts. You sort of keep Midland County together for the most part, Bay City together. The significant difference, the 97th district that comes and picks up part of eastern side of Midland, and then stretches far south and east. So I know I stole a little bit of John's thunder there, so let me just end that. Encourage everybody to check out our work at crcmich.org. John, I assume you're going next.
All right, good morning, everybody. I'm going to request control here. If I can.
You should have the ability to share your screen from the bottom. Got it?
Yep.
Oh, good.
All right. Okay, can you see that? All right, so greatly appreciate you coming this morning. We'll just, Jeff and I will kind of just build off of what Eric has kind of teed us up for and really give kind of the local context to what we're talking about. And really, Eric alluded to this, but why do we do the redistricting? Because the Constitution identifies it. That's the main reason we do the census, is to make sure that we have a fair and free democracy. And this was part of the framework of the original founders of our country. And obviously, Eric mentioned that we passed a constitutional amendment at the state level that we've created at this Michigan Independent Redistricting Commission, which basically created a framework for redistricting across the state, along with our congressional seats, state and local, or I should say congressional seats, state, house, state, local. But the one thing to keep in mind, and it's a very nuanced conversation, is while we've done it to Congress, state house, state senate, our local counties and city seats are still redistricted, not under this Michigan Independent Redistricting Commission. Those are done locally. We didn't talk about the census results much, and that should be also part of this conversation, is that while Michigan, we did go up 2%, overall, we didn't grow fast enough to maintain a congressional seat, and we fell from the 8th largest state to the 10th largest state. So when you think about North Carolina and Georgia, they have now passed us in size of population. And so you hear a lot of discussions right now, what do we need to do by 2030? And there's discussions, how do we add 1 million people in the state of Michigan? That's a 10% increase. But, anything really above the 3% mark would be able to save a congressional seat. If we were able to reach 4 to 5%, we would be able to likely add a congressional seat. How did these impact Michigan? So here's just a quick rundown. Michigan lost a seat, but states, there were a lot of states that added a seat. Colorado, Florida, Montana, North Carolina, Oregon. Texas added 2 seats. And so as you see, again, we've known this migration for the past 40 years, that it's come from the Midwest and the East Coast, and it's gone to the West Coast, the Sun Belt states down in Arizona, and also along the southeastern coast, North Carolina, Florida, etc. Again, we did better than we did in 2010, but again, not good enough to be able to maintain our congressional seat. What were the census results in our region? Every county lost population. Midland County only lost 135 individuals, but as you see, comparatively alongside Saginaw County and Midland County or Bay County, there was a significant loss of population in Saginaw County, also significant loss in Bay County. The demographers will tell you that this is primarily because we have an aging region and we don't have an influx of new people filling those spots. So we're likely to see this again in 2020 and 2040 unless we see a serious turnaround. And I know a lot of the chambers, including the MBA, are working on talent attraction and retention pieces. Here at the bottom, if you compared our region, if we were a CBSA, we would have a total population of about just a shade under 400,000. So if you've ever been down to Naples, Florida, that region would be very similar to Naples, Florida in size. Here in Midland County, as I mentioned, small population change, but when you look at comparatively alongside the change in population at the US level, 7%, Michigan change in population was 5%. So how do these results impact Midland County? And so now Jeff and I are going to kind of go through what does this look like when we look at different congressional maps, state house maps, state senate, county commission, and city council. As Eric mentioned, this is what the new map looks like. Now, Eric at the end, he mentioned we now have these compact areas. And I often reference this, that if you go back only 20 years ago, we actually used to have 3 congressional seats in this region. You would have a Bay City seat that kind of grabbed the thumb, went up the northeast coast. You had a Midland seat. You had Congressman Jim Barsha in one direction. You had Congressman Dave Camp in Midland going kind of northwest. And then you would have had Congressman Dale Kildee, which picked up parts of Saginaw County. Him and Jim Barsha both had parts of Saginaw County, and he went south. And so now this new congressional map, 20 years later, has us in 1 congressional seat. That right now, the incumbent running that seat would be Dan Kildee, but also we know that Congressman John Molinar represented Midland almost for the past 10 years. He will be running again, but he'll be running in the 2nd congressional. Jeff, anything to add on this?
Well, I think when you get into the so what does it mean kind of portion of the conversation, what it means, depending on where you live or where your business is located in Midland County, it means that you're going to have new congressional representation, not from Midland. So there is no candidate from Midland County running for Congress in the 8th congressional district, right? If you're in the new 2nd congressional district, it means that the city of Midland is no longer going to be the population center anchoring that congressional district. That congressional district going west, Congressman Molinar, just based on math, is overwhelmingly likely to win that seat. But when you look at it, it covers all or parts of 24 counties. When you take Clare and Gladwin counties kind of to this northeast corner of that district, it runs along 115 all the way to Arcadia. If you recall, for Arcadia, Bluffs are up in that top corner, goes down to Muskegon and all the way down to Berry County, right? So thinking about representing your interests as an individual or as an individual business owner, or the MBA as a kind of a collective voice of business, there are a lot of issues and a lot of interests that cover all or parts of 24 counties, right? So I think when we look at what does it mean, it means that what we all have to figure out and kind of reposition how we engage, because the politics have changed and the politics will change, and the issues that are relevant to those who are representing our communities may change along with it.
One thing before we move on to the who's running in these races, just to understand the 1st district up here, that's currently held by Congressman Bergman, who's the incumbent, Congresswoman McLean over here in the 9th, Congresswoman Slotkin down here in the 7th, and then over here in the 3rd, this would be Congressman Peter Meyer. And the 2 districts to really keep in mind here, as Eric was saying, they created competitive districts, is that Congressman Meyer's district over here in the 3rd is actually a lean Dem seat. And this seat over here for the 8th is a very marginal seat compared to where Congressman Kildee was, just in the last election. And so, as Eric was alluding to, if we're talking about they were looking for some of this competitive fairness, we'll see in the next election what that means. Here are those candidates for the 8th and the 2nd. Obviously, We both know both of these names right here at the top, Congressman Dan Kildee, Congressman John Molinar, Paul Young, Candace Miller, not the former Secretary of State and Congresswoman. I want to make sure I mention that. And then Matthew Seeley. These three will be running for the Republican in the Republican primary. The winner of the Republican primary in August will face off against Congressman Kildee in November. Down here at the bottom, Congressman Molinar does have a primary opponent. As Jeff mentions, I agree with him that Congressman Molinar, I don't think due to his incumbency, has to worry about this primary challenge, and then will face off against Jerry Hilliard this coming November. Jeff, anything to add on this?
No, I think just maybe one final point to tie it back to an MBA priority. So when you look at what the MBA Committee on Infrastructure is doing around advocacy on flood infrastructure and flood mitigation, we have the benefit now of that entire area of the community of the region represented by one person, right? So in these new maps, when you look in that top left corner, Sanford and the Sanford Dam will go into this new 8th congressional district, and then everything north of that and west of M30. So a big chunk of that watershed goes west with Congressman Molinar, or into that new 2nd district, I should say. So just when you look at issues that are both timely and things that are sort of part of this active file of things the MBA is working on, I think thinking about how these new maps impact not necessarily outcomes, but approaches to getting those things done, and who may be helpful or not helpful. Just I want to highlight one in particular.
The next map is our state Senate map. And as Eric mentioned, we have a much more compact district in this 35th that represents Bay City, Midland, and Saginaw. The other Senate districts that have been spun off, you've got the 36th up here to the north, 34th over here to the west that represents the other half of Midland County, the 26th down here to the south, and then I don't know what number this is off to the right, but it's basically a thumb seat that represents Tuscola, Sanilac, Huron, down into St. Clair County. Something to mention here that Eric talked about, and this comes back to the Independent Redistricting Commission, that they said they were trying to create these communities of interest. And this is where we talk about regionalism. This has created a regional seat. However, at the cost, if you look down here in Saginaw County now, instead of having, currently they have one senator for that entire county, they now have 3 senators that will be representing that county. Up here in Bay, where they had 1 senator, they're now going to have 3 senators. And over here in Midland County, where you had 1 senator, you're now going to have 2 senators. And so always understand that when, the definition of community of interest can be different. Are you looking at the primary taxation, taxing authority and the county seat in the largest city in that Senate district or House district? Is that the community of interest? Or is it this larger regional entity? And so it can go one way or the other. And so there are 2 arguments out there for this case. But as Eric said, when we talk about political fairness, this does create the 35th district, which is a slight leaning Dem seat. Jeff?
Yeah, so the commission used 2018 gubernatorial general election results to measure partisan fairness. So this is a 54.5% Democratic seat based on the 2018 numbers. I think, at the risk of being competitive, and Eric sort of mentioned this in his comments, but when you look at the overall Senate map across the state, if you talk to Democrats, they have 17 seats that they think are safe. They have 2 seats that they think are toss-ups that lean Dem, and there are 4 seats that they think are true toss-up. They put this new 35th Senate seat in this lean Dem category, which means that if they hold all 17 of the seats they think are safe and win the 2 that lean Dem, including this one, they only need to win 1 more seat. Actually, they need to governor needs to win re-election, and they have a majority in the Senate, or they need 1 more Senate seat. So it's not an exaggeration. It's not hyperbole to say that this new Senate seat that includes Midland or parts of Midland County may be or will be the most expensive Senate race in the state. it will be among the most competitive in the state, and it will go a long way to determining which party controls the majority in Lansing. So it's a highly competitive seat. It's one that Republicans in the old maps have traditionally won. Democrats have never shown that they can win, at least in recent memory, can win a Senate seat in this part of the state. So it's a high prize for the Dems, and it'll have a big impact, not just in the region, but in the larger statewide outcome. The other piece that I'll mention, just because it's always of interest, local issues. This new Senate seat does not include any of the dams or any of the kind of the targeted flood mitigation area when you get into Stanford. That all goes to the west of the 34th Senate District, which is likely Roger Houck, but who knows?
And as Jeff was just mentioning here, the individuals running for those 2 Senate seats in the 35th, this is the regional seat. Martin Blank, Annette Glenn, Tim Kelly, Christian Velasquez will all face off in the August primary. And then they will face Kristen McDonald-Rivet in the November election. And then down here in the 34th, it'll be Roger Houck and Lisa Sowers facing off in the August primary. And they'll be facing off against the Democratic candidate in November. One seat that was not on here, but I do want to mention is the Senate 26th Senate seat, even because of the borders, Midland County just here to the south. This will likely be Senator Kevin Daly, who's from Lapeer. He currently represents portions of Bay County and Tuscola County. Looking at the state house map, moving on to the state house map, in this race, this community of interest actually creates a Midland County state house seat with parts of southern portions of Gladwin County, but as well the current Representative Glenn, her seat kind of goes into portions of Bay County that kind of created a broken Bay County into 2 seats. So there is one solid Bay County. Well, I should say there's three seats in Bay County, but there's one seat that represents a majority of Bay County. That would be Representative Tim Beeson. And then there's this new blue boot, as it looks like it's somebody sitting on a chair, and there's a boot down here that brings in Auburn, Williams, Freeland, northern portion of Saginaw County, the eastern portion of Saginaw County, picks up Clio, and then picks up over half of Tuscola County. This is currently a new seat. Rodney Wakeman, who's an incumbent, is currently running for that seat. He's facing off against Matthew Bierlein, new candidate in the race. Down here in Saginaw, the 94th, they've created it's about half of Saginaw Township with the city of Saginaw. And then off to the west here, you got the new 93rd, and this is likely to be current sitting Representative Graham Filler, who lives down in Gratiot, or in northern part of Clinton County, and this will represent Gratiot, Saginaw, Clinton County, and a portion of Ionia. And then over here on the 92nd, which represents portions of Gratiot and Isabella County, there's a number of individuals in this race. And then the 99th up here, which picks up portions of Gladwin County, northern parts of Bay County. The mayor of Augrey is facing off against a superintendent from Roscommon County. Jeff, anything to add here?
Just a few thoughts. So the state house seat is the only seat, the only Midland seat or Midland County seat that's guaranteed to have a representative from Midland. So this is a overwhelmingly Republican seat. So you have two, maybe 3 Republican candidates in the state house seat. It includes the city of Beaverton, but I think this is probably the most straightforward of all of the new districts. It trades a bit of Bay County for a bit of Gladwin County. The only interesting piece here to me is that Midland probably loses a bit of representation in these new maps. In the current draft of the maps, or in the current maps we have today, we have Roger Houck, who's in Mount Pleasant, that has the western portion of Midland County, and then we have Annette Glenn, who's got most of Midland County. This new map has one person covering all of Midland County, so it just another change in the dynamic when we're talking about who's representing Midland County issues and who's got the most skin in the game. We go from 2 people with parts of the county down to 1.
Looking at the candidates for the district of the 95th district, here are the candidates. We'll have a Republican and Dem primary in August, and then the winners of those races will face off in the November election. Not going to go too much into these local seats, but again, here's just a high level to look at what the county commission seats look like moving into 2022. Again, these were not drawn up by the Independent Redistricting Commission. Here is the new city council map. It's changed a little bit. The county commission district seats are also kind of embedded in here, so it's difficult to look at, but the orange is Ward 1, the blue is Ward 2, yellow is Ward 3, green is Ward 4, and then the fuchsia is the Ward 5. Jeff, is there anything to add in on either of these maps?
Nope.
Okay. Okay, and we will end there and open it up for any questions that you might have, Diane, Eric.
Mhm.
I appreciate being able to speak this morning. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Eric, Jeff, and John. Audience, this is your chance to ask questions of our panelists, our speakers. At the bottom of your screen, there is a Q&A box, and you can either drop it in there or you can raise your hand. If you're kind of savvy with Zoom, you know how to do that. And I can turn on your audio for a question. So while we are waiting for questions to come in, I do actually have a couple of questions that our panelists could address. Okay, so that was a lot of information about the background of redistricting and why we're doing it and how we got there and what the process entailed. And obviously that kind of springs from the census. So we're going to do this again in 10 years. And what does it look like? Do we use the Citizens Independent Redistricting Commission again, or what should we expect?
Yeah, I think so. It is my estimation. I'm a political science guy, not a politics guy, but it's my estimation from looking at the stuff that most people don't reside on the far right or the far left of the political spectrum. They reside in the middle, and they want government to work. And I think on the whole, this process that the redistricting gone through is going to get high marks from the citizens, especially when they look at what's going on in other states and see the extremes that some states are going to. We're looking at changing term limits. So I was struck with Jeff sort of giving his political estimation of these districts. It really only applies for the next couple of years, unless we do amend our term limits and give the candidates longer to stay in office. I expect we're going to go through this commission process for several years until it becomes obvious that it's broke in some way. But each year we're going to have new people, new interaction, new efforts to hear from citizens. I don't know that you'll ever build up momentum.
Diane, my input is that it's enumerated in the Constitution. The people voted on it, and unless there's an initiative, a referendum put forward to remove it from the Constitution, this is the process that's going to be in place for a long time. This year's ballot initiatives do not include anything that amends this, and so I think you're going to be looking at this. My personal opinion is that when it was drafted, I think the one part where they really the drafters really messed up on was excluding anybody that had anything to do with politics in Michigan. I don't know of any board of directors that would select their CEO, having the board of directors know absolutely nothing about the contextual matter of the organization they're selecting the CEO for. I get the good governance piece of it, but I kind of laugh because I'm a registered lobbyist. My wife couldn't serve on the redistricting commission, even though she has nothing to do with that. So I think there is an element there that was lost when you do have some individuals that understand the system through this last process. And I think it was demonstrated with, if you watch the hearings, some of the ineffectiveness of the communication and not understanding the process between those commissioners. And basically, when you have that, you have to lean on staff. And so then the question becomes, how much was it really these commissioners directing it, as much as it was staff providing their input, and the commissioners were listening to those staff. And those staff, at the end of the day, have their own political lens. They're involved in politics. So if the staff are giving input, why can't those commissioners come from a political background? My 2 cents and my opinion of what I've observed, and I think that's really going to be, if we adjust anything, that might be something that gets adjusted in the future if they decide to continue moving forward with the system.
Okay, thank you. Jeff, do you have any thoughts on that?
Not really. I mean, I think it's hard to imagine a scenario where there's the political appetite to revisit, amending the Constitution for a second time on the same topic, right? There are a couple of ways to amend the Constitution. The legislature can put it on the ballot through votes of the legislature, or organizations can launch petition drives to do that. I think there's a larger appetite to seek out some changes to the petition process itself, particularly around the citizen-initiated piece of the Constitution. So I think if you saw an effort to tweak that process, maybe that includes on the fringes changes to constitutional ballot petitions, and then there's some follow-on effort there. But no, I don't think there's any appetite to revisit. This is just too difficult of a hurdle to get over.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Well, we do have a question in the Q&A box here. The question is, why don't more of the districts align? So we're talking about the congressional and the state Senate and House. Why don't they align a little bit better to bring more efficiency and reduce overlap? Anyone want to tackle that one?
Because they didn't have to. I think the process itself, as an outside observer, the process was sort of an incoherent process. So there were general criteria that the Constitution established in terms of how these districts had to be drawn, but the commission was given broad latitude to draw and establish communities of interest, and then draw maps that match those communities of interest. So if you watched any of the actual hearings, they went through maps and tweaked individual districts based on feedback from community stakeholder groups, and that feedback differed from congressional maps to Senate maps to House maps. So I think it's kind of a simplistic answer from my view. I think I'm of the 3 panelists, I cracked the top 3 of the smartest people on the panel, but probably fall at the bottom end of the top 3. But I think just the sheer politics, it didn't have to.
Right.
So they didn't.
Right.
Jeff, I think you're dead on with that. They came up with 3 maps and they announced them at the same time, but it was really 3 processes to come up with 3 maps, and they weren't in any way related. There was some discussion leading up to 2018 of changing the number of representatives and senators. Right now we have 110 representatives, we have 36 senators. If you were to change that in some way to make the number of representatives a multiple of 3 senators, and then you could embed those representative districts within the Senate districts. So that was mostly among us political science geeks, I think. No real discussion on a public level. There is some logic to doing that, but as Jeff said, right now we don't have to. And I think when you looked at the proceedings of the commission, that was consideration. They were dealing with 3 different maps, and they all had to finish at the same time. but they didn't have to relate to each other.
And I think answering the congruency question, I agree with Jeff. You had, it was enumerated. This is what we have to follow. Here's the process we have to follow. Combine that with a whole group of individuals that were kind of neophytes in this space. And then you start off with the communities of interest where everybody wants to be together, and you get to the end. And as I keep calling them, the grab bag seats. And people keep asking, well, why do you have 24 counties in one congressional seat? Or I mentioned that state house seat that has 4 different counties. You have a whole handful of these seats, and they're kind of these sandwiched seats that fill in between the communities of interest. So you got districts that represent communities of interest, then you've got a handful of districts that represent nobody. I should say represent no communities of interest. But again, that was part of the process that was enumerated in the Constitution, and this independent redistricting commission executed the best that they could with the rules that they had in front of them.
Right.
Diane, I think if you go back to if anybody watched the public testimony or sort of this kind of public deliberation of the commission, and you remember one of the early drafts of the state house map, it was like people were calling it like a robot arm, a dog bone. It was the city of Midland, US 10 over to the city of Bay City. And you heard in their own words, the commission debating amongst themselves, well, we've heard from communities of interest in that region that Midland County should be kept whole. So we'll keep them whole in the House map, but in the Senate map, we're going to break it up and kind of satisfy this other ask for communities of interest among the regional Midland Saginaw Bay. So this open process, whether you agree with it or not, or think it worked well or didn't work well, you at least got to see the thinking and this kind of open trading among commission members on how to satisfy kind of the disparate comments going back in.
Okay. All right. Okay. I don't see any further questions in the chat, but I do have a question from Tony about the commission. Actually, I've got kind of 2 related questions here. So early on in the program, Tony noted that not everyone is satisfied with the maps, and there have been some legal challenges. So are there still any viable legal challenges that are kind of pending, or is this it? Because in some other states, we do still see some viable legal challenges. Is it over? Is this it?
Yeah, these are the maps.
All right, these are the maps. This is it. So what's next for the commission? Are they disbanding, or is there a role for them to play going forward?
So as mentioned, the enumerated bylaws gave some ambiguity on the question that you just asked. And so it becomes, do they get to collect a salary for the next 8 to 9 years leading up to the next independent redistricting commission? What do they do?
Yeah.
I think that one is that question is still to be answered. And I think they get to set their own path on culture unless somebody challenges them.
Interesting.
We did see Arizona and California, as I said, have gone through the same process, created commissions. And what we did see from there was responding to things, legal challenges or bumps in the road in the interim between the 2 censuses. And also commissioners being called to other states. A number of commissioners came to Michigan to talk about their process. So I don't know if that was on our dime or their commission funding was paying for it. I think they can probably go home and go back to their day jobs, but that commission is going to exist in legal sense until
Kind
the
of in
next
the
one
background.
is created. And there may be some things that they need to convene on from time to time to wrestle with. I think John's cynicism is right. They probably don't need to collect the salary, but if they need travel expenses and time to be in Lansing for a meeting, we should do that. but go back to their day jobs, and thank you for your service.
Okay. All right, I have one final question. So as we head into the elections, this process is done, the maps are in place. As we head into the elections, what do you think? Do you think we're going to see some information coming out of the Secretary of State's office on what these new districts look like to help inform the voters? I haven't seen a whole lot from the state level to help people understand what the new districts look like. Or are voters going to have to rely on programs like this one we're doing right now at the moment? What did you guys say?
I think, the winners of these races are the candidates. I think the candidates are out there informing the voters what these districts look like.
Mhm.
Every candidate that I kind of hear from, they're talking about this is what your new district looks like. And I think it's the learning curve that takes place every 10 years. It's just that this learning curve, there's been significant change in a lot of districts. And so I think that one, there's a little bit more of a learning curve for candidates, but it's
Mhm.
difficult with some of these seats. And I mean, obviously we've seen gerrymandering take place all over the board, but I mentioned that one seat that picks up Auburn, Williams Township, comes down to Freeland, Tippawasee, goes directly east, almost to Tuscola County. What does go into Tuscola County, it shoots all the way south to Clio. Going and campaigning in a district like that is very difficult to explain to those people that you're representing people in Auburn, Michigan, Frankenmuth, and Carroll, and they're kind of sitting there going, how is that possible?
Right,
When
right.
the person that lives in the city of Midland right next to Auburn has one candidate representing all of Midland County. And so I think that's probably the most difficult part with some of these candidates explaining what their district looks like.
And I don't think you're going to get much out of the state to explain these districts, but I do think the media will probably pick up the pace. And here we are, it's still early June. The primary is not until August. I suspect they're probably going to keep the powder dry until probably closer to that primary, where the media and the conversation really picks up. There's a lot of political burnout, just 24/7 news cycles and everything.
Mhm.
People are not really focused on state elections and primaries things yet. But as we get closer to August, I think we'll pick up some of that.
Okay. All right, we've got one more question in the Q&A, and then we're going to let people get back to their mornings. So the question is about those commissioners once again. So a couple of them towards the end of the process were starting to look a little bit partisan. Is there any way to address this? Or is it just a done deal?
So
No,
go ahead.
No, you go.
I was going to say the commission was not intended to be nonpartisan. It was intended to be independent from elected officials. So, I mean, by definition, the commission consists of 4 members of each party plus 5 independent members, whatever or 6. My math, I don't know what the math is. 5, yeah, thanks. So what does independent mean? I don't know. Michigan doesn't require anybody to register by party. And there were no criteria set for how the Secretary of State chooses independent members other than individuals have to certify that they don't affiliate with either party. So I think that's one of sort of the flaws of the process, or at least one of the challenges, is that the public interpreted it to mean a nonpartisan commission, which was never its intent. It was just intended to be independent from elected officials, so that elected officials were not drawing their districts. And I'm open to feedback from others if they think differently, but
That's
it's
an
nonpartisan.
excellent point. Excellent.
Yeah, Jeff, you're right. It was very intentional to say 4 Republicans and 4 Democrats. So we knew that 4 people would come in with a partisan bent to what they were doing. The 5 independents, we just have to take their word for it, right? There's no, as you say, nobody registers as an independent. The part of the process that the parties are going to have to learn to use, there's a weeding out process once a bucket of names are drawn as the potential commissioners. And the party leadership from the House and Senate has an opportunity to go through those names and say, I reject this person. He's clearly an R, she's clearly a D, whatever. So there is a part of the process where somebody can say, you are not an independent. Somebody knows you, they know that you have strong feelings one way or the other. But once those, what's the legal team, the judo or whatever, you cancel out a part of the panel. Once that's done, then the candidates are left to go forward and it's random selection. But I would say though, you might end up with independents that get through the process, are clearly partisan. But again, without getting into the detail, there's sort of game theory in the way the maps are chosen to push those candidates to the middle, to push candidates to maps that can be agreed on by everybody in the commission. It really doesn't behoove any of those commissioners to hold out for a strong Republican map or a strong Democratic map. There's a good chance 12 other commissioners are going to vote against that person. So it is meant to be partisan, but it's meant to overcome that partisanship.
Okay. Okay, well, gentlemen, Eric, John, and Jeff, we're going to leave it right there. I thank you for your time. And at this point, I'm going to bounce it back to Tony Stoutenberg.
Thanks, Diane. And I join Diane in thanking Eric, Jeff, and John for sharing their expertise and time today. I think this is fascinating and it's really important. It's going to, in terms of where Michigan goes in the years ahead and our federal legislators, this is really critical in terms of that process. So this impacts all of us professionally and personally. So thank you. And please watch. We're going to put together a pre-election information, try and make sure that we get this out. We're glad you could join us, get this out to a wider audience as we get close to the August primary. So in the end of July, we'll put this together. The Midland Business Alliance doesn't endorse specific candidates, but we do want to plan for opportunities to provide information to our members. We're looking at ballot questions, millage renewals that we'll see at the polls. So all of our members and we can help in terms of the community make informed decisions. So much more to come. Again, our gratitude to Warner, Norcross, and Judd today as our program sponsor and throughout the 2022 season. Really makes this all possible. So we're pleased you can join us for today's program. With that, we hope you have a great day and enjoy the beautiful summer weather. Thank you.